Alright, hello everyone. Today we're going to cover adding and subtracting algebraic expressions, but this with a common denominator, so this should be a short and pretty simple video to go through. Alright, so unlike other videos, again, we've got a lot of steps involved. Now this is going to cover not just common denominator, but also uncommon denominator, which is another video. But I wanted to give you all the steps so you can see what's involved in something like this. Because again, adding and subtracting, most people think is easier than multiplying and dividing, when actually, when you get into advanced mathematics, it sometimes isn't. Okay, so we got a lot of things to go through here today. Alright, so let's take a look at our first example. Nice, easy question. Okay, so 4t minus 1 over 1 minus 4t plus 2t plus 3 all over 1 minus 4t. So let's run through our steps. So step 1 says factor the denominator. Well, in this case, I really can't factor the denominator because frankly, okay, there's no need to. Okay, so we can't factor the denominator, there's nothing to factor. Alright, now here's where the fun comes in. Identify your LCD pieces. Okay, this is going to be a kind of a difficult part for this. Okay, so I'm going to kind of scooch the slide over so we have room to work here. Okay, so my common denominator now, or LCD. Oh, that looks terrible. Let me fix that. Let's try that again. Oh, come on. LCD. Okay, and the common denominator pieces. Okay, when we do stuff like this, okay, the monomials are pieces outside a parenthesis. We try to find their common factor, okay, which is kind of weird to talk about right here because it's not happening here. So when we get to one that does, I'll go a little more in depth. Stuff in the parentheses, believe it or not, it's the easiest stuff to go for because you already know what it is. It has to be that. Now, but here's our one rule for this. Every time you list it in the LCD, it covers it one time and one time only under each fraction. So in demonstrating this, my common denominator piece in the parentheses is 1 minus 4t. Okay. Now what that means is every time, because I listed it once here, it covers it once under every fraction. So yes, it covers it here one time, and it covers this one under this fraction one time. Okay, so that's kind of a tricky rule with that. So we've got to be careful. All right, so we have now identified our LCD pieces. That's all we have. Next step. Now this we're not going to see so much here because of the fact that we have common denominator already. Create the common denominator. I don't have to because we already have common denominator. This one we're going to see in the next video when we have uncommon denominator. Okay, so we don't have to create common. Multiply your tops. Oh, wait a minute. Multiplier tops also pertains to creating the common denominator. So again, steps 3 and 4 right now, we're not going to really deal with here because again, these two components go together. Okay? So again, for this video, we're not going to be dealing with that. So we're going to go, we can't multiply the tops. So now we're going to mush the fractions together. Distribute the negative to the top pieces of subtraction. Well, in this function, I have addition, so I don't have to worry about the distribution of a negative because we don't have a negative because we're not subtracting. So we're just going to mush the fractions together. So we're going to take our 4t minus 1, come on, and we're going to add to that, so plus 2t, come on, plus 3, all over our common denominator, which is 1 minus 4t. Okay. Now again, common student mistake is students say, well, I had it written twice, so shouldn't I have it twice here? Well, no, because again, on a side note, say we took 1/4, oh, come on, and added 1/4, right? I think this pen's starting to die here. Okay, if we have 1/4 and 1/4, yeah, 1 plus 1 is 2, right? But we don't go, well, 4 plus 4 and make this 8. No, we keep it as 4. Why? Because that's our common denominator here. Okay? So we don't need to do multiple denominators because we list off just the LCD. So let me get rid of this. Okay? So again, whatever our LCD is here, that's what we put here at this point. Okay? Now, next step, combine the terms on the top. So now we're combining like terms. So the 4t and the 4t, that's 6t. Come on. So we're going to have 6t. Okay. Then we have our constants. -1 plus 3 is plus 2. Okay, wow. Over our denominator of 1 minus 4t. Wow. Now again, I'm also going to put this in parentheses because frankly, it is held with a plus or minus. Okay, so I'm going to shrink this, kind of move it up a little bit here. I'll move it over here. Okay. Alright, so our next step, factor the top. So looking at the top, I know it's kind of hard to see, that is a 2 right here. Let me erase that, fix that, that looks awful. Or maybe it won't let me. Okay, so that is a 2 right here. 2. Okay, so we're going to take out GCF, because I can factor this using GCF. So I'm going to take out a 2, leaves me 3t plus 1. Plus 1 over our denominator of 1 minus 4t. Okay, so now we factor. Our next step is to try to reduce if possible, but again, as we discussed in a prior video with multiplying and dividing, to reduce, remember, numbers on the outside of a parenthesis are monomials. We play the higher lower game if we can. Well, because there's a 2 here, and there's nothing down free and single in the denominator, you can't do anything there. Numbers inside a parenthesis like these guys, in order to cancel or reduce, you have to have the exact same thing down below, which we don't have. This is 3t plus 1 on the top. I have 1 minus 4t on the bottom, so I can't reduce. So this right here is your final answer. All right, so there's that one. All right, let's go to the next one. Jump too far. All right, so let's take a look at this next one. Okay, this one will be a little more interesting because we have a subtraction involved. Okay, so let's start. Okay, step number 1, factor the denominator if we can. Well, again, this is going to be m minus 4. Now, at this point, what I like to do, now again, kind of a word of kind of a heads-up thing is, anywhere between step 1 and 5, this minus in here we can distribute at any time. Okay, it is a lot easier to make this an addition problem than to keep it subtraction, because a common mistake is the distribution of the negative. So what usually I like to do right before I even start the problem is I like to convert this to plus, and in doing so I have to change the signs in the parenthesis above, and only the parenthesis above. So this goes now to negative m. Oh, come on. This is going to become a positive 2. Okay, let's see if I can fix that. because that negative is way the heck up there, and I don't like that. Okay, so right here. No, looks like it's not going to do it. Okay, fine. We'll just have to remember that's a negative m. Okay, that's what happens when you're working on a damaged screen. Okay, so let's run our process now. So, factor the denominator we've done. Can't do it. Step 2, identify the LCD. Alright, so are there any free and single pieces? No, there are not. Okay, so let's go to the parentheses. All I have is m minus 4, and it's listed one time under each fraction. So, okay, so we have that.
Oh my god.
Okay, so we have m minus 4 as our common denominator. Now our next step, create the common denominator. We already have common denominator, so I don't have to do that step. Multiply the tops. Well, again, I didn't have to create common denominator, so there's nothing to multiply the top. So again, like I said earlier, steps 3 and 4, we're not going to worry about here. That'll be in another video. So next step, mush the fractions together. Distribute the negative if you have not already done so. We did that earlier. That was the conversion of the subtraction here to a plus symbol, and then distribution of the sign. If you hadn't done it yet, this is the part where you have to do this. You don't have any choice at this point. It needs to get done. Okay, so I'm going to put this all together now. So we're going to have, okay, so we're going to have the 2m, if I can write it, 2m plus 3 plus, so that plus in the middle now, that was originally a minus, and then we have to be careful because we have negative m plus 2. Now again, somebody would say, well, gee, wouldn't it be easier just to write this right here as negative m? Yes, and you could do that, absolutely. Okay, but I'm just being systematic here, so you can write that however you want. Okay, so now all over my common denominator of m minus 4. Okay, so now we've mushed the fractions together. Right, so I'm going to shrink this a little bit here, move it up so I have more work to do.
Yeah.
Okay, now at this point, combine like terms. So here we go. 2m minus m is just m. 3 plus 2 is plus 5. Over the divisor, and again I'm going to put this in parentheses, of m minus 4. So it looks like an m, kinda, sorta. Okay, so now it's combining like terms. Yeah, you see a blue jay, Gwen? Wonderful. Now factor the top if we can. Well, it's m plus 5, so I can't. And then reduce. And again, m plus 5 over m minus 4. Again, it's awfully tempting to go for these m's and cancel them, but you can't. Remember, they're in parentheses. They are bound as one piece. You cannot just pick and choose pieces off of this. It doesn't work like that. Okay? So, this right here is your final answer. Okay? So there's that one. Whoops.
Oh my god.
Alright, so let's look at this one next. Special denominator. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so beginning this one, we have to be a little careful. Okay, so step number 1, factor the denominator. And believe it or not, there is factoring to do here. Because notice how this and this, they're kind of the same. But the pieces are written backwards and the signs are opposite of each other. So this is a positive 4k, this is a negative 4k. This is negative 3, this is positive 3. So to fix something like that, so 7k plus 2. Now I'm going to keep this first denominator the same as 4k minus 3. Okay. Plus, okay, now we have 8 minus k. Okay, over our denominator. Now I'm going to factor this. I'm going to take out a GCF of negative 1. by taking out negative 1, and then I'm going to reorganize the pieces. So negative 4k divided by negative 1 is positive 4k. And positive 3 divided by negative 1 is now negative 3. So when you see something like this where the pieces are the same, but the signs are opposite, just factor out a negative 1. It's going to make your life so much easier. You see, so many times people try to do the common denominators, those two things, and it's not necessary. It makes a lot more work for you. Okay, so there's part 1. All right, now my next step, identify the LCD. Now here I've got a little something on the outside, so I have to worry about that. Okay, so we have the negative 1 on the outside. Okay, and then I have the 4k minus 3. These are my common denominator pieces. Okay, so now at this point, okay, create common denominator. Now I know this video kind of says everything should be the same, but this shows up here and it's not. Because of this, we have this negative 1 out here. The 4k minus 3's I've got covered. That's all set.
Nice.
Yes, I see the blue jay. Wonderful. Okay, we have the negative 1. So, create common denominator means we make sure that all the pieces of the LCD are under each fraction. Now this one, this first fraction, is missing the negative 1 down here. So we're going to multiply top and bottom. We're going to have this negative 1 over negative 1, so I can create the common denominator. Okay. So now I have all the elements of my LCD underneath this first fraction. Now, multiply your top. Okay. So that's where we're just going to take this negative 1 and distribute it into this fraction. Okay, so I'm going to kind of shrink this down a little bit, move it up so I have more room to work. Okay. Gwen, be careful with that cat. Okay, so you're going to have negative 7k. Come on. Negative 7k minus 2 plus, we have the 8 minus k. Let's see if I can fix that. Kind of in a bad spot on the screen because it's broken. 7k. That looks better. All over the denominator now of negative 1 times 4k minus 3. Okay. All right, now that we have that, mush the fractions together. We just did that. Oops, I kind of did 2 steps in one. I'm sorry about that. So now, combine like terms on the top. So 7k minus k is 6k.
Oh my god.
Okay. Negative 2 plus 8 is positive 6. Over the common denominator of negative 1 times 4k minus 3.
What is that?
Okay, so now let's shrink this again so I can work even more. Now our next step says to factor the top. Well, again, this is held together with a parenthesis here. There's pluses and minuses here. So if I factor this, I can take out a GCF of 6. So kick out the 6, leaving at k plus 1. Over my denominator of negative 1 with 4k minus 3. Now, let me make that look like a 3. That looks terrible. Okay. Now our last step says to reduce if possible. So again, as we discussed in a prior video, 6 over negative 1. Now again, most math people don't like the negative 1 here. So what they're going to tell you to do, send it to the top, multiply with a monomial that's here. So we're going to get negative 6. It's terrible. Oh, come on. That's what happens when you're working with a broken screen and a 2-year-old banging in the back, right? Okay, so we have negative 6, parenthesis, k, plus 1, over the denominator of 4k minus 3. Okay. Now it says to reduce if we can, but obviously there's nothing here I can reduce with. Again, awfully tempting with this negative 6 and this negative 3, but you can't because this is in a parenthesis, this is not. So you cannot reduce that. Okay, so this right here would be our answer. Alright, so one thing we really didn't discuss, and we should, is what if it looks like this? We have 3 over 2a plus 4 over 2a. So we have monomials as the denominator. Okay, so we should take a look at that real quick. Alright, so first thing we do, let's follow our steps. Step 1 said that we had to factor the denominator. But I can't because it's just 2a. It's a monomial, I can't factor it. Step 2 then says, okay, I need you to identify the common denominator. So my LCD in this case is just 2 and a. Right? Because monomial common denominator of 2 and 2 is 2. Common denominator of a and a is a. So your common denominator is 2a. Now our next step, okay, says to identify or create common denominator. Well, I don't have to because, again, I have 2a as my denominator. Multiply the tops. Well, there was nothing changed from the denominator, so there's no step there. So now at this point, we're going to mush this together. So we're going to have 3 plus 4 all over 2a. Okay. And then let's combine like terms. So 3 plus 4 is going to be 7.
I haven't picked up anything.
All over 2a.
Whole packet.
Okay. And then last step says to reduce, so try to play the higher-lower game here. But again, I'm going to have 7 over 2. That's the only thing I could really play the higher-lower game with. And 7 over 2 I can't reduce, so it stays as 7 all over 2a. Okay. All right. Okay, so there's that one. Alright, so that's it for now. Again, thank you for bearing with me through the technical difficulties and a screaming 2-year-old in the background, because that's always fun. So, again, hopefully you learned a lot, and I will see you next time. The next video will be on adding and subtracting unlike denominators, which gets definitely a lot more fun for us all. So, until then, I will see you then. So, catch you later.